The spread of COVID-19 is, of course, causing a lot of anxiety. For some guidance on how to deal with it all, we are joined now by clinical psychologist Dr. Simon Sherry. So there's been a lot of talk about the physical impact of this virus, but what kind of toll does it take mentally, and what are some of the tools we can use to cope?
Fear, panic, anxiety, intrusive thoughts, all of these problems abound amid a difficulty like COVID-19. Fortunately, there's much that people can do in response to this threat. One thing to do is to certainly think rationally and respond proportionately. When anxious, your brain wants you to greatly overestimate the likelihood of danger so that the threat that's actually there gets magnified. If we thought of COVID-19 as a fire, irrational thinking or maybe even catastrophic thinking ends up being a gas that's poured on that and inflames the actual threat.
Now, self-isolation and quarantine are some of the best ways to curb this virus, try and get some control over it. What is your advice to folks who are stuck at home? How do you stay mentally healthy while you have your kids and, you're in a small space and trying to cope with all that?
Well, social distancing doesn't require social or emotional distancing. In other words, you can still remain psychologically close to someone, connected to them in terms of communication and intimacy without necessarily having direct physical proximity to them. And as a word of caution, I think that people can get over-communicating about COVID-19 such that it dominates all conversation. Instead of that, I'd encourage people to remain current, to remain factual, and maybe to confine their conversation and to have some boundaries and some limits.
Now, what about the financial strain a lot of folks will be feeling as businesses shut down? What's your advice for those not only worried about the virus, but how they're going to pay their bills?
That's a huge stressor, and it's a brutal and undeniable stressor. At the same time, I think it's important for people to realize that these difficulties will pass. And I expect that no one, or virtually no one, will have lasting negative psychological difficulties arising from this event. What you see is that people are resourceful and they're adaptive and they're resilient. And in the vast majority of cases, people will move on and be okay.
Now, what about your kids? How do you talk to them about COVID-19? What's the appropriate language to use to keep them informed but not to scare them?
I think you communicate with your child at an appropriate level given their age and their stage of development. And I think you don't look past the opportunity here. Reframe this for your kids as an opportunity to make a contribution to their community, to reach out to and to help some of our more vulnerable citizens, such as people older than 70 years old or people who may have been ill or immune compromised prior to the onset of COVID-19. There's a real opportunity here for us to teach children pro-social values.
All right. Well, Dr. Simon Sherry, thank you so much. We do appreciate it.
I enjoyed the conversation, Amy.